For more reaction on the choice of U.S. Senator Max Baucus as the American ambassador to China, I spoke earlier to Douglas Paal. He is Vice President for Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace.
I think it's an important choice because the president was trying to signal to China that he's picking a big man for a big job, much as he chose a very famous name for Tokyo recently with Carolyn Kennedy. He wanted the people in China not to think they came up short and got somebody who wasn't also a major player in the American political system.
Looking at this period, in the relationship between the United States and China, I want to read you something from a Global Times commentary talking about the role of ambassadors in China. It said their individual influence on this bilateral tie is limited, but a breakthrough on mutual trust is what is absent from Sino-U.S. relations. It needs to be included with the next ambassador's agenda. You agree?
Well, I agree that every ambassador should try to establish a relationship of trust. The gaps between the U.S. and China, the misperceptions, the cultural differences are such that mistrust is going to be with us a long time. If the ambassador can narrow those gaps a little bit in his time there, that'll be a plus. But that's not the measure of his performance. The measure of his performance will be how he advances American interests and values in respect to the various things the Chinese and the Americans do with each other or sometimes against each other.
President Obama, as you've mentioned before, has tried to get more Americans into China. What does that do?
Well, I think we've had a deficit in the United States in the number of people who've had an exposure in depth in China. Chinese universities don't have labs and attractions that bring in large numbers of American students. People who go there will probably go for reasons of cultural understanding and language training. But the president has a program called the 100,000 Strong, which is an effort to get 100,000 Americans over to China to learn those things and try to make up the deficit with China, where China has over 235,000 students in American universities and graduate schools.
There have been recent tensions between the United States and China, as we know. Will it be Max Baucus's, one of his primary aims initially when he gets there, is to tamp down those tensions?
Well, naturally it'll be to tamp down the tensions. Now, he does not come with an extremely detailed background in national security strategy and diplomacy, but he does have the record of having worked very hard, even when his own party was set in the other direction, to maintain the U.S.-China trade relationship through thick and thin, especially in the early 1990s. And he was quite creative in doing that. He had good people helping him on his staff. He's famous for having good staffs. So I think he's got, this is a pretty important person being chosen for this job.
China, it would seem, is ready to get the confrontational aspect out of this relationship and is looking at more cooperation with the United States. There was that recent incident involving the U.S. Navy cruiser. But the Chinese Defense Ministry said afterwards that relations with the United States military are, in fact, good. The incident, according to the ministry, showed us that there was communication between the two sides.
I agree with that, and I think that the media coverage of this has been looking for the more sensational storyline. For example, Secretary Hagel gave a press conference in the last day in which he said the Chinese actions by the skipper of the one boat that interfered with our boat's travel in the South China Sea have been irresponsible. And the New York Times selected that headline as the main piece of the story. But in fact, if you read Hagel's statement and General Dempsey's longer statement, both of them put those in the context of working with China to try to make sure that we can safely navigate around each other, whether in the South China Sea or anywhere else. So I think the negative spin comes from a kind of media fascination with friction.